How you will finish. Without any force capable of stopping this persecution, God will intervene. Jacinta told Ramon Perez and Jacques Serre in 1979, "These difficult events will occur before the warning, because the warning will only occur when the situation is at its worst." This is confirmed by Father Brennan's article. But then, as if to fulfill what Jesus said, unless those days were abbreviated, no one would survive. There will be a direct, fascinating, and terrible divine intervention that will completely reverse the course of world events. There was another question that was asked of Mariloli. Question: if you cannot tell the exact year of the warning, perhaps you could say roughly when it will happen. Mariloli: yes, it will be a time when the world needs it most. Question: what is this? Mariloli: when Russia suddenly surpasses and is part of the free world. God does not want this to happen so quickly. In any case, the warning will come. When you see that the Holy Mass cannot be celebrated freely in any place, will be when the world will need the intervention of God. This prophecy is a charism of the papacy. As we read in Pius IX, there will come a great sign that will fill the world with astonishment, but it will only occur after the triumph of a revolution during which the Church will have to undergo tests that are beyond description. We do not know when this will happen, but Albrecht Weber's book contains the statement attributed to Conchita. The Pope will go to Russia, to Moscow. As soon as he returns to the Vatican, hostilities will explode in different parts of Europe. The source of this information was also questioned. Mr. Weber replied, "Conchita told me this in a long conversation at her house on November the 14th, 1965. The worldwide communist rule led by Russia will seem to take place amidst this frightening aggression that will culminate in the persecution of the Church. The priests will have to hide, the churches will be sealed, and it will become very difficult for the faithful to practice their religion. It will seem that the Church will have disappeared. The duration of this persecution is unknown, but will require an act of God, the warning to stop it." To close on a positive note, we again quote Father Brennan in his 1983 article. As a result of all this, there will be a return to God, which will ease the apostasy, and thus, as Our Lady said at Fatima, an era of peace will come to mankind. There will be a peace just as the world has never known. The word communism spoken at the apparition. When communism returns, then everything will happen. Quote from Conchita in the German book from Albrecht Weber. "What do you mean, come again?" "Yes, when he comes again." "You mean before that communism will disappear first, before that happens?" Note, it must be borne in mind that by the time the book was published, communism was still very much alive in many European countries. "I do not know," Our Lady simply said, "when communism comes again." The persecution. Their faces at the moment of the visions testify to the trauma experienced by Jacinta, Mariloli, and Maricruz during the first night of the cries. Mariloli seems to have been the first to speak about it in 1967, when she gave information to a Mexican priest, Father Gustavo Morelos. 3 years later, the same information in the possession of Mari Sarraco was written and confirmed by Mariloli with her own signature. The information that was transmitted was as follows. "While we continued to see the Virgin during the first night of the cries, we saw a great multitude of people who were suffering intensely and shouted in terror. The Blessed Mother explained to us that this great tribulation, which was not the punishment, the Church, which suffered terrible suffering. We asked the Virgin, 'What is this great suffering?' and she told us that it was communism. This first revelation about communism would be explained years later by the seers. With the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and with the freedom of the countries of the Eastern Bloc that took place in the following years, we got the idea that communism was over, and that's what the media do. However, not everyone is convinced. A few years ago in Canada, I spoke to a priest from an Eastern European country who lived under communist rule. He told me that Americans are naive to think that communism is dead. In their industry today, the same people who were in power during the communist regime are still in present times. Another person from a country other than the Eastern Europe expressed the same sentiments. Communism today is infiltrated in the form of a cultural revolution, even in the church, through the theory of liberation that seeks to withdraw the divinity of Christ. What is the extension of this tribulation? What geographical areas will live this communist persecution? Some references were made specifically to Spain. On February 23, 1943, Sister Lucia of Fatima, who spent 21 years in Spain, Tuy and Pontevedra, sent a document to Bishop Antonio Garcias de Tuy, Vigo, which reads, "If the bishops of Spain listen to the desires that have already been manifested by our Lord, and to begin a real reform of the people and the clergy, then everything will go well. Otherwise, Russia will again be the enemy for which God will punish again." And Conchita said communism will return to Spain, but she said she will suffer less than other areas of Europe because of the persecution she had endured during the Spanish Civil War between 1936 and 1939, where 13 bishops and more than 7,000 priests and religious were sent to death. Conchita, we asked the Virgin what this suffering was, and she told us it was communism. Was the persecution only in Europe? When questioned about this, Mariloli replied that the way she saw it, thought it would be more like that. Conchita's aunt, Antonia, said she heard the seers say in ecstasy that if we do not change our ways, Russia will take over the whole world. If this is the case, then persecution will be everywhere beyond the confines of Europe. Other sources. This great suffering has been mentioned in the writings of saints, popes, and blesseds, as summarized by Father Joseph Brennan in his article, The Prophecy of Our Time, which appeared in a May 1983 issue of a magazine titled, "Christianity Will Go Through a Severe Test, and There Will Be Many Purifications. Such confusion will reign until it seems that Christendom has almost disappeared." When the Pope visits Russia. The book of Albrecht Weber, a German writer who interviewed Conchita on November the 13th, 1965, contains this testimony attributed to Conchita. The Pope will go to Russia, to Moscow. As soon as he returns to the Vatican, hostilities will explode in different parts of Europe. This quote helps us understand the moment when everything will truly begin to happen, giving rise to a persecution, invasion, or revolution of communist or anarchist nature. God, to avoid this advance, will bear fruit of His mercy with the warning. We remind everyone that Mariloli said in an interview that the warning will only happen when things are at their worst. The source of this information was also questioned. Mr. Weber replied by letter confirming the following. Conchita told me this in a long conversation at her home on November the 14th, 1965. A schism before the warning. According to several interviews that were made both in the visionaries and to the people who were close to these events, the following was said. Concerning the warning and before it happens, the situation in the church will be very bad, to the point that an event will occur which will be painful and devastating. In fact, Seraphim, the elder brother of Conchita Gonzalez, said that he heard his sister Conchita, one of the four seers, during a bliss to announce that the warning would come after a painful tear of the church, a kind of schism. Thus, the warning that will come will be associated with the painful mystery that the Church will cross. Likewise, Mariloli, one of the 4 girls of Garabandal, also said that at that time the Pope could not be in Rome openly, that they would persecute him, and that he would have to hide, and this would occur before the warning. On the other hand, it is known that in the future miracle of Garabandal, the Pope will see the miracle wherever he is, which may indicate that he will not be in the Vatican at that time.